It's your weekly breakaway for fun conversations on pro cycling and so much more. Join us as we go beyond the slipstream. I'm Matt Harper, and together with my brother Justin, we'll do deep-ish dives on bike races, movies, bands, and all manner of shiny pop cultural objects. Oh, and did I mention bike races? We're kind of obsessed. Allez!
Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Slipstream. I'm Justin, and this is my brother Matt. And today, in our first segment, we'll be running through some storylines from both sides of the pro Peloton as 2024 comes to a close. Newsflash, we are a mere 26 days from stage one of the Women's Tour Down Under. That's only 3.5 weeks. In segment 2, we'll finally discuss pro cycling's elephant in the room on the pod. One, Lance Edward Armstrong. We're going to focus this first of a two-part conversation on his life and career right up to his first retirement. And in our final segment, it's season 3 of HBO's The Wire, where we are kicking it with the gang from Charm City once more in our ongoing look at this groundbreaking police procedural. And as always, we'll finish with a wee ride in the Broom Wagon. Allez! Today we're starting with a conversation of the 2025 pro cycling season, looking at a few storylines as we head into the new year. What stories have you most excited?
Well, amid the Remco Evenepoel crash news and wondering what things are going to be looking like for him heading into the season, which is kind of front of mind for me because he's such an exciting rider. And the, Primo's prospects, which is always sort of front of mind for me as well because Primo's is my guy. Honestly, the one big thing I'm really looking forward to is seeing a lot of Kopecky and Demi Vollering going head-to-head this year. There was yet another news story about how they just been sniping at each other in the press. Demi came out with some statement about how things were like really awkward with them, and it got to the point towards the end of the season where they like weren't even speaking with each other and avoiding each other. And I don't know if bad blood is the word, but this rivalry between them goes back. I mean, I think it was it 2 years ago at Strade Bianche at the end where they like straight up sprinted against each other. That was a crazy finish. I'm pretty sure Vollering won that in the end. But Kopecky is going to have serious GC aspirations at the Tour de France, I think. We saw her basically wear yellow for the entire race except for the last day 2 years ago. She, I feel like, has been in a transitional phase. Her body has kind of changed a little bit. She's sort of skinnying up and becoming more of a GC focused rider. And I think it's going to be on like Donkey Kong between these two this year. I cannot wait to see them going head to head because they're going to be gunning for each other.
Do you think the awkwardness at the end of the, or I shouldn't say at the end of last year, but just during last year contributed to the fact that, there was not the best communication during the Tour de France and obviously, in my opinion, contributed to the fact that, she lost all that time. I mean, obviously the wreck didn't help, but the fact that her team wasn't there behind her, her teammate kind of rode ahead, and was it really a radio thing, or was it just that the team was in bad shape mentally and just wasn't they weren't riding for her? I mean, do you see that as a possibility?
I mean, I think all of that. I'm not sure I don't think anybody will ever know what happened there, but I think all of that just plays into setting up this drama for 2025 because I don't know that Kopecky was directly involved in that situation. I think she was already.
I don't think she was.
Yeah, she was already behind the group that Demi was in when all that went down. It was more of a Vivas and was it Blanca Voss, I think, that kind of screwed her over. But it's those sorts of vibes that were going on within the team.
That's what I'm saying.
And I think Demi is just going to have a big chip on her shoulder. I mean, one of the quotes that went back and forth that I was alluding to just a second ago was that Lottie said something like, Demi's a great rider and she's achieved a lot, but she owes a lot of her success to SD Works and to the team and everything, which, I'm sure if I was Demi Vollering hearing that quote, I would just be so incensed, because my whole thing would be like, oh, where was the team at the Tour de France last year? I would have won the Tour de France for the second time if the team was there, because I mean, I really think that had the team played that thing differently, she wins the Tour de France, no question about it.
I mean, it was too close. It was so close that there's almost no doubt that she would have won the Tour de France.
Yeah, we're talking about 4 seconds.
Cassia doesn't get that close if it isn't for all of that, nonsense going on prior to that final stage.
So basically, Dami's got.
Sorry, go ahead.
Dami's got this need to prove that, it was mostly me.
You also, but I wonder, had she already lost the team at that point? Like, had whatever, infighting that had been going on, had she already lost him at that point? I mean, and, because of whatever that turmoil was, maybe, riders didn't do what they should have done. Who knows? I think it's very interesting. I think it's very interesting because you're going to spread out a little bit of parity, and you're going to create a little more parity in the women's pro peloton.
Oh, it's going to be so much bigger.
Oh yeah, well, but I also think that it provides a better opportunity for riders like Cassia to have continued success and go up, against these guys, because maybe not so much for Lotta, because her team, she's comfortable with the people around her, but for Demi, she's going to have a year of trying to figure it out with new people. And I personally, I think Canyon SRAM has a really solid roster, and could absolutely take some big races without any doubt, for sure.
For sure. I mean, just the fact that you're going to have hopefully a, still in good racing shape Cassia, Dami, and some combination of Kopecky and Van der Breggen going head to head at the Tour de France. I mean, that just bodes so well. Plus that girl, I can't remember the name of the woman that ended up in third, that had that incredible ride with next to Dami Vollering at the on the last day. Her name's escaping me, but it's gonna be interesting. Plus, who knows? Maybe ELB will be in the mix as well. So yeah, Women's Tour de France next year looking so good. I mean, last year it was just it ended up incredibly, but it was looking like it would have just been a Vollering steamroll. So super stoked for the Women's Tour de France, and anytime we see Kopecky v Vollering,
it's going to be fireworks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
What do you got? What are you looking forward to?
I found it very interesting that that Tom Pidcock came out and said that he is not going to be doing any cyclocross this year. I think it's a very interesting move, him leaving Ineos. It makes me wonder if that guy is just a complete nightmare in the bus. I love him. I mean, dude, look, I love that guy, dude. I love when he does I love his ends. I love when he wipes the bike, all that stuff, dude. Like, I think he's a phenomenal descender. I think he has huge potential to be able to have, major success in the in the men's pro peloton. But I do wonder if he's just like a bad team guy, you know what I mean? Because boy, it seems like it has just been really, really bad there with them for a while. And it seems like they kind of all agreed to play this like, oh, it's not that bad situation so they could get him more money and get him off the team. And
yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree that it's certainly possible that he could be kind of nightmarish. I mean, our thought initially when we heard that he was going at Q36.5, which is like definitely, second tier team, if that.
For sure.
They
might be like third tier, honestly.
Third tier. I think people's big thoughts was, oh, well, they're going to give him the leeway to like mess around with the cyclocross like he wants to, or like with the mountain bike like he wants to, since he'll be, the biggest superstar by a long shot on that team. So to hear now that he's only going to be focusing on the road, or mainly focusing on the road, is somewhat surprising, I guess. At the same time,
I think that's what they're paying him for. I mean, I think that's what it boils down to. Is they're like, okay, that's fun. We're glad that you like to ride your bike on the dirt, but we want you on the road.
Yeah, I mean, for the team, the money's on the road. That's what these teams are gunning for. So yeah, it will be interesting. I mean,
do you see him more stage hunting or actually going to try to win a GC battle somewhere? I mean, I could definitely see him winning a GC in a smaller race. I don't think that he has anything I don't think that he's anywhere close to the level of Jonas Hurtado or Primoz or Remco as far as being able to honestly compete for a Grand Tour right now.
Yeah, I don't think he's. I would say if he has any Grand Tour aspirations, they'd have to be 3 years down the road minimum. I think that it is conceivable that if he focused like on 1 week stage races, and got a selective field in one race, that he might be able to compete. He might even be able to podium, depending on who's competing. But any of those people that you just mentioned, Pog, Jonas, Remco, Primoz, and maybe a handful of other guys out there, like if any of those are there at that stage race competing for GC, they're gonna be higher than he is. Like any of those guys are gonna beat him. So, will we see a Pidcock podium at a week-long stage race? I'd say possible. But if Q36.5 is getting him in there to build towards a Grand Tour thing, I think we're gonna see him focusing on 1 week stage races, and I don't know how well it's gonna suit him. Because he hitherto has been more of a stage hunter / classics kind of rider. So
now I could very well see him being very classics heavy focus. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that would be good for them, and from a point standpoint as well.
I'll have to take a deeper look at what Q36.5 is all about, but
now. Speaking of Grand Tours, and I know how much you love Primoz, and I've already said it here on the podcast that I really think that Red Bull Bora-Hansgrohe is absolutely building a team to win right now. What do you think of his Giro Tour combination?
Well, I was listening to Lantern Rouge's deep dive on Red Bull, and I'm not so convinced. I mean, I agree that they're looking to get some immediate wins with Primoz in the stable, but I also believe that they are building for some future stuff, which we can get into at another time. But I like Giro Tour for Primoz because the Giro is going to have a much better field for him, and the profile of the race is one that I think suits him a little bit better than the Tour. And basically, if he goes and wins the Giro, which is their plan, then he can relax going into the Tour. He doesn't need to hope to win it. He will already have a Grand Tour win under his belt for the season, and the second one that he's provided for Red Bull. And he can relax and hope for the best at the Tour de France. So
I don't know. I feel like he always relaxes. So one last thing that I did want to mention, we talked about transfers a couple weeks ago, and one that we did not mention. I'm a huge Visma Lisa bike mark. They are definitely my favorite team. Victor Campenarts to Visma, I think is huge. I think that is such a great piece to throw in there, especially with some of the things that they've lost. And then there's a new one this week that I thought was really interesting. Dan McClay is actually going over there to help lead out Olaf Koy, which I think is really, really cool because it also says that they are going to be out there hunting stages, that their total focus isn't just on Grand Tours. So I think it's really neat how that team focuses on the whole aspect of racing as opposed to just focusing on like one specialty. And, they have such a stud in a guy like Olaf Koy that they're like, look, we can't just let this guy die on the vine and we lose him to another team because we focus mostly on the Grand Tours. Here, let's give you one of the best, lead out guys that we can give you right now. And I thought that was a really, really smart move on Visma's part.
Yeah, so, I'd love to see them resurrect themselves a little bit this season.
It's so funny. It's like you can go back and look at that stuff, and they didn't have a bad season, but we're like, oh, they've got to rise from the ashes. So, on that note, we will be right back. Lance Armstrong is probably the most famous road cyclist in the history of the sport, having won the Tour de France 7 consecutive times between 1999 and 2005, before having those titles stripped from him by the UCI after he admitted to using banned performance-enhancing substances throughout that run. He remains a very polarizing figure in the sports and cycling world, though in recent years he's done a great deal to rehabilitate his image. He's multitasking away with podcasts, race analysis, businesses, nonprofits, you name it. Today, however, we're going to focus our discussion on his life and career right up to his first retirement from the sport, before the doping allegations came to a head and the real story became known. I, did not really focus on Lance's run. I was not into cycling at the time, and I had a lot of other things going on in my life. I was ending high school at the beginning, and I was a young father during. But I know that he was super important into your introduction into cycling. Where did you first really pick up the Lance Armstrong thing in your life?
Well, I mean, he was 100% the reason that I got into pro cycling as a fan, because I, at the time, was coming off of my European adventures and was all into traveling and was fancying myself like a hiker and a camper. And so I had a subscription to Outside magazine, and they started leaning in hard on the Lance Armstrong story. I think when I got into it, it was probably around 2003 or 4. So towards the end of his run, I mean, I think I was watching regularly for the last 2 tours that he won, which of course is a great time to get in there because that's when he's really, bringing the whole project to its culmination. And so were it not for Lance and his story, I don't know that I ever gotten into pro cycling, that we'd even be sitting here right now, doing this podcast. So I have to attribute it all to him. And coming in, cold, fresh as I did, and not knowing anything, of course, it was this incredible story. This guy who beat cancer, and to go on and reach the pinnacle of endurance sport on the planet. I mean, it is an amazing story. And to be honest, because of the amount of doping that was going on during that time throughout the entirety of the Peloton, I still consider what he did a monumental achievement. I mean, you don't win the Tour de France 7 times in a row, 7 times in a row, doping or not, without being a total badass. And the man was a total badass. I mean, he got it done. And watching it in the moment, not knowing what was going on behind the scenes and not knowing for many years after that what was going on, it really was just this beautiful, beautiful thing, this American success story. And, you know, like all cycling fans, learning how professional cycling works is a beautiful journey for any sporting fan. You know, all the little details of pro bike racing combined, and as you learn them, they become this beautiful package of this incredible sport that we love so much. So yeah, I mean, Lance was the guy. He was my guy for sure for years.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll talk more about this, you know, when we talk about the kind of the second half next week. But I've never made I've always made my opinion known about how I feel about, you know, the performance enhancing drug situation. Is that, you know, whether it's Lance Armstrong winning 7 Tour de France's, or it's Barry Bonds, you know, hitting 100 and whatever dingers, or, you know, Mark McGuire or Sammy Sosa. Look, man, like, step into a professional batter's box and try to hit a fastball. Like, I don't care if you're doping or not. It's still a hard thing, and you still got to break those records. So, you know, that's always one of my sticking points with these, you know, eras where, like, you know, performance enhancing drugs were rampant through the thing, you know, blah, blah, blah. I will say, you know, watching, you know, kind of going back and doing research about Lance, it had to be exciting. It had to just, because I can remember Lance being like a rock star. Like, to me, he was like a sports rock star. He was a guy that beat cancer. Like, you know, obviously, like, you couldn't not know who Lance Armstrong was during that time. But, like, I remember him, like, you know, dating Sheryl Crow, and, like, he was a celebrity. Like, he wasn't, you know, he wasn't, you know, he was like a Michael Jordan type figure. You know what I mean? He was so big. And I guess you know, it's really funny because, like, it's weird to kind of think back on it and to look back on it now and, like, not having been into it. But knowing what I know about cycling now, I mean, like, God, if you think that Tadej Pogačar is a superstar, this guy was gigantic. I mean, he was everything to cycling, and cycling embraced the fact that there was a top American rider. I think that the UCI absolutely loved it. I think, you know, everybody that was involved in it was absolutely loved it, and it probably contributed to why the scandal went as far as it did.
I agree with everything you said, except for like European cycling loving the fact that the American was becoming the greatest Tour de France guy of all time. I don't think any Europeans loved it. I think they freaking hated it.
I think the UCI loved it.
No, I don't think they did. I mean, I think they acknowledged that it was good for the sport, that it was definitely bringing the sport to a global level. But, you know, the people on the UCI did not love the fact that an American was winning the Tour de France year after year after year. I mean, the UCI is run by French people. Trust me, they weren't happy about it. And that's why I think it was so very easy for them to strip those titles away from him, you know, because everybody knows Eddie Merckx was using amphetamines the entire time he was bike racing, but
but nobody wants to say it.
Stuff stripped away or whatever. So, but again, we're going to be getting into that later.
Yeah.
But you are right. He was like rock star level, and because he was an American, for us American fans, I mean, he gave great interview. You know, I mean, Tadej Pogačar is this incredible champion, but you know, his post-race interviews are not blowing our minds or anything like that. But Lance would like get in there and give you this analysis, and he seemed so thoughtful, and he didn't necessarily have this like super winning personality, like, oh my God, he's so hilarious and stuff like that. But because, again, we were so innocent back then, we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. You know, whatever he lacked in personality was just so easy to attribute to his like just singular focus and his like Spartan, you know, work ethic. And, you know, he didn't have time to work on making jokes because he was taking care of winning the Tour de France, man. You know, so But he was, he was a champion. I mean, he just got it done year after year after year. And he, in the big moments where there was, a question that, could go one way or the other, he got it done. He got the results. He won the races. And
to quote Ricky Bobby, he was a big, hairy American winning machine.
That's right. That's right. Well, no, I wouldn't say hairy though.
I know he was hairless. I should say hairless American winning machine. He was an unapologetic winner, and he was also an unapologetic loser. I mean, like he would get, he was very, very passionate, and you could see, he was cocky from a young age when he finally found his way, and I could totally just see. I know the way America is with things like this, and I'm sure people just loved the unapologetic nature of it. And it's like, oh, here's an American coming out and dominating this foreign, more or less foreign sport. And it's interesting. And, you also wonder too, if I definitely wonder is, did his use of like HGH, did that contribute to his cancer? Does any of the mystique end up happening if it's not for doping? Like in some way, like, it's so intertwined into.
Yeah, I mean, the mystique was already there. Like, the doping just sort of took it to Shakespearean levels. The way the whole thing played out. I mean, it was just kind of a great big positive story until it wasn't. But looking back on his early life, I went back and started watching the 30 and 30 doc again. Since we're talking about his career, his life and career before he retired. It's just kind of interesting knowing what I know now, watching that. I mean, he just seems like such a cocky bro looking back in the day. That's something I never would have seen back in 2004, 2005 when I was watching, and I wouldn't have even crossed my mind. But we've seen this incredible arc of call it wokeness or cancel culture or whatever. There's just been a much greater sort of cultural awareness of bad behavior amongst the celebrity set over the past years since his thing happened. All of that stuff just kind of came right before the public kind of woke up to bad guys in a big way, and so he dodged all of that. Nobody knew all of that, and nobody would have looked at him as an early racer and been like, what a bro, what a cocky asshole or whatever. I don't know, but it's like knowing what I know now and seeing him back then, I'm just like, this guy, it's all right there. It just seems like it's all right there. And yet his accomplishments really speak for themselves. I mean, he was just going out there and crushing people at every stage. The world championship win was nuts, and that was before all the Tour de France's. I mean, that's pretty impressive the way the dude was just like, all right, let me go out and win arguably the biggest one-day race in the calendar. And now for the Tour de France, pretty staggering.
Well, and it's funny because we talk about, when things woke up, when you look at the world of sports and the giant, superstars, Tiger Woods' big controversy came in 2009. So, I mean, you're right in there. There was a lot of falling major sports stars, that were where, and it's probably the big, as the internet became more, because obviously I think it was easier to get away with things before the internet and social media. I mean, can you imagine what would happen today if that scandal if you had pushed everything up 10 years, and how much worse that scandal would have been in the social media era? I mean, it's unbelievable. And he is very because I've watched a lot of his stuff recently, especially this year with the Tour de France. It's like you can tell that there's some amount of contrition there, for him, but there's also a part of him that's like, still like, you know what, I still did it. You know, my opinion is evolving about whether or not I agree with, you know, what the UCI eventually did to him, and we will you know, continue that discussion next week, because there are some certain things that I think are very interesting about the latter half of that controversy and what happens after he retires that are very interesting to me, that reverberate even today in pro cycling. I think there are things that happen when that scandal breaks that we are absolutely maybe just now getting past in pro cycling. So,
yeah, I mean, I agree. It would have been very interesting if all of his teammates had you know, Twitter access back then, and people were out there tweeting away during these races. One boggles at what it would have been like, but yeah,
yeah. So let's put a pin on it. Or a pin in it right now for this week, and then we'll pick up there next week, and we'll go. So on that note, we'll be right back. Season 3 of HBO's The Wire saw the show move in new directions while continuing with all of the storylines that had fans locked in from the start. In this season, the focus on politics in the city of Baltimore became central to the story, with the character of Tommy Carcetti, the up-and-coming city councilman who makes a run at the mayor's office, becoming a major player in the city and the show. At the same time, the Major Crimes Unit continued to battle Stringer Bell and the Barksdale organization as a new kingpin arrived on the scene, the quiet, mysterious Marlo Stanfield. What are your thoughts on Season 3?
Yeah, Season 3, absolutely loved it. I think the show at this point is really hitting its stride. We have been prepared to see the introduction of whole new worlds and bureaucracies within his show, because Season 2 took that hard left turn onto the whole scene with the union guys down at the docks, and we realized that the show overall was going to be a much larger, more comprehensive look at these organizations throughout the city. So them leaning into the political side of things just felt like a natural progression, and the show did itself a huge favor in casting the British Aiden guy as Tommy Carcetti, because he's totally charismatic and a lot of fun to watch, even if he is like a little bit snarky, but it just makes him more interesting to watch him. And he's got his like right hand man there that was just so great, and it's just so fun seeing what this down and dirty political operation looked like. And then once again, as the show is so brilliantly does, the way that all of that is woven into all of this pre-existing storylines, it's just beautiful. And then the storylines continue to just get more and more interesting with every single character just playing out these fantastic arcs. How about you?
I think it's great how the show, like with each season, it's expanding its mythos, and it's expanding how the story, like it's, you know, it's almost like Season 1, you're like looking at it like this, and then Season 2, you're kind of looking at it like this, and it's like now this picture is getting bigger and bigger and bigger to where, you know, and you're going from this laser focus on this one part of it. Now we're seeing Season 2, we're going to see multiple parts of it, how they connect together. Season 3, it's like, bam, we're now you understand how we want the show to go. We're going to kick it into top gear, and we're just going to be relentless throughout the season in, you know, moving the story forward and introducing characters that are, you know, amazing enough to carry the show on, because you're going to lose characters in this season that like people are completely attached to. And it also kind of starts that thing that HBO has done through other shows where it's like, you know, character, like just because a character is huge and everybody loves it doesn't mean that they're safe. And, you know, I feel like with almost every single character that this show seems to introduce, you connect with them like really quickly, whether it be Marlo Stanfield or, cheese Wagstaff, or, all these different guys that they introduce throughout the Prop Joe, and, that kind of pop up throughout the show and then kind of continue on through it. They're so good. Dennis Cuddy. I mean, like, what a great character that is, showing a guy that's getting out of jail, that was in the drug game, that realizes that now that he's out, like, I don't really want to be in this. Like, he doesn't know anything else. So like his immediate thing is to go back and get right back in the game. And he realizes real quickly that, like, his heart ain't in it. Like, it was a young man's game. And HBO does such a great job of making all of that feel so organic and so natural. And it's just, man, there's just so much to love about this season, from, how the Barksdale crew is reorganizing, and they start that, like, co-op where, like, it's like we're all going to get together, all the drug dealers are going to get together, and and it's like they're really running it like a business. Or how the police start, how Bunny Colvin starts Hamsterdam, and essentially legalizes drugs in Baltimore, or at least in a part of Baltimore. And all of the kind of repercussions. And it's very interesting on the political, to have the political side of it, because now they can show you what's happening with the police, but then how it affects the politics of the city. All right. And how it's affecting the drug trade. Like, it's just so brilliantly done, and there's so much going on, but yet it's totally accessible.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really one of the absolute, like, strong suits of the show, is the fact that they have all of these plot lines going on, and yet it doesn't become unwieldy. They know how to walk the line. They give you just enough without it really becoming confusing. Like, that's one thing about that show. There's other shows that I watch, and movies and stuff, where I'm just confused. I just can't keep track of everything. And somehow this show finesses that so perfectly. And then the other thing is with the building of the characters. Like, you mentioned the character Cuddy, and he's such a great character. Half of it is because of what you don't see, what they don't tell you. You just know that this guy was an enforcer back in the day, and they just give you just enough. He was an enforcer, he was part of Muscle back in the day, and now he's running a boxing gym. So this is a guy who knows how to fight, and he has just got so much pathos. It's like, what are Dennis's demons? And you're hooked. You're hooked to these characters, and they do it with every dang character on that show. They give you something to hook into, good or bad, that just makes them so believable, so interesting, and you gotta love these storylines.
Well, and they do such a good job of, like, sprinkling in these, like, side characters, like, three of them that literally come to mind are all lieutenants in the different drug organizations. Slim Charles, amazing. Snoop and Chris Partlow, just,
so good.
Like, and you just, it's like, and I think this is why this show captures my imagination. It's probably why it's regarded as one of the best shows that's ever been on TV, is that you're right. They do such a good job of walking the line, of giving you just enough to make you feel for these characters. And it's like, and again, it's that anti-hero. It's like they give you the bad guy. They're like, look, here's the bad guy. Here's the bad guy. You should not like this. And you're like, oh, but I really do like him anyway. It's like, and even in a character like Tommy Carcetti, where it's like, is this the good guy? No, he probably is the bad guy. Like, he's not, he's not really a good guy, but
he convinces you that he's gunning for, like, he's for the city. I mean, like, he does a really good job of convincing you. At the same time,
right.
His ambition is just, like, so naked to you as a viewer. You're just like, this guy is so out for himself. It's not even funny, but he sure does a good job of convincing you that he really wants to make the city of Baltimore great.
Right. It's and again, they do such a great job of continuing the storylines, and I definitely do. I feel like they hit that like top gear, and they're just off to the races. And like I said, you even have these moments like where the whole, where they bring Omar back, Omar back into the fold in the Brother Mouzone, and they, the Brother Mouzone, Stringer Bell, Omar thing comes to ahead at the end of the season, and they kill off Stringer Bell. They kill off Idris Elba in the middle of the third season, and you're just like, and I can remember thinking in this moment, I can remember the first time I saw it, thinking like, oh God, they're not going to kill Stringer Bell. Like, how do you kill this guy? Like, how does that make sense? But I think that is a testament to the reality of the show, is that in the game, so to speak, there are no guarantees, that these guys, this is how the drug game works, is, power, it's like if there's a vacuum, someone's going to fill it, and power is intoxicating. And so, you have a guy like Marlo Stanfield that's like, I want to be powerful. I want to be the top of the game, and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get there. And, also, Stringer Bell is trying to create something that could exist for a long time, and he just gets completely taken out by his own mistakes. His own mistakes come back to haunt him, and they end up costing him his life, and it completely changes the direction of the show, in my opinion. And
one would speculate that because of the show, Idris Elba went from an almost nobody to like a superstar in the space of 2 seasons, and
totally.
By the third season was probably starting to get major offers and was ready to move on. But the show had done such a good job in the first 2 seasons of developing that character and developing the world, that when it came to writing him off the show, it was easy as pie and completely believable. I mean, they've done all the legwork to make that his exit from the show possible, and it was a bold swing, but at the same time,
but it totally works.
As beloved as that character was, there were so many other characters and so many other things that fans to be hooked into that I don't think they had any kind of a concern that killing off this huge figure was going to do anything to hurt the popularity of the show, and of course it didn't.
No, and it's a shocking moment for sure, but I feel like you're like, yeah, the game's the game, man. And like you see it happen, you're like, they killed Wallace like in the first season in that brutal scene where his own friends execute him in his bedroom, and it's like you realize that this is the drug game, like this is the reality of it. This is what they're showing you. So it's just,
and as far as like the mechanics of the plot go, I mean, getting rid of Stringer Bell just sets up Marlo Stanfield perfectly, because they've sort of given this image of Avon Barksdale as sort of being he's like sort of a thug gangster, but he's like out of touch in a way. It seems like he's out of touch. He's like too old school, and Marlo Stanfield, and but it's like the show makes you think that, and it makes Marlo all the more scary and mysterious, because he's just like this soft-spoken, low-key guy. But Stringer Bell's gone now, and now you're looking at Barksdale versus Stansfield, and that's looking like an even match, no problem.
For sure, and I also love the fact that like it continues the arc of how the technology is changing, and how the police are evolving with that technology, with the burner phones. It's just, the whole thing is just like, man, it's so interesting how it all ends up playing out, so, but we got a couple more episodes where we're gonna break down some even more stuff. But season 3, like I said, very good. If you haven't watched The Wire, you should definitely go watch The Wire, like before you watch anything else. It is groundbreaking television, and in the US obviously you can find it on Max. So on that note, we'll be right back with the Broom Wagon. Today in the Broom Wagon, I'd like to talk about a show that my wife and I have been watching. I honestly can't believe that I haven't brought this up with you prior to this. It's on Apple TV Plus, and it's called Shrinking. Have you heard of this show or seen the show by chance?
No.
It's probably the thing that I would say that if go immediately watch it. It's on Apple TV Plus. It stars Jason Segel, the guy from Forgetting Sarah Marshall and a bunch of those other movies, from the last 10 years. It also has Harrison Ford and then just a bunch of other people. One of my favorite ones though is Ted McGinley is in it, and I don't know if you know who Ted McGinley.
It's a comedy, right? Isn't it a comedy?
It's like a dramedy, I would say.
I heard somebody mention Harrison Ford being in a comedy TV show, and I was like, what?
Yes. Okay. So the show revolves around a group of therapists that all work together. So Jason Segel, Harrison Ford, and then there's a woman that is also in their office, and they're all three shrinks. So Jason Segel's character, at the beginning of the show, his wife has just recently passed away, in the last year, in a car crash. And the show is really about how he, his daughter, his neighbors, and the people that he works with, how they're dealing with that. And this show, it's it starts a little, I don't feel like it starts slow, but it is such a great show that gives you an understanding of how important mental health is. And you have these really great characters, and it really revolves around therapy and getting things out. And it does such a great job of hitting you right in your heart, where, it's a good balance of comedy, drama, and kind of putting a light onto a topic that is hard for people to talk about. I think mental health in America is one of those things that even still today is still a little stigmatized. And here's a show that puts it out on the absolute forefront and tells you, it says, listen, this is extremely important. And it's just a great show. I found myself in tears a few times. I have found myself just absolutely, my wife and I just absolutely love it. I would say that it's probably her favorite show right now. It's ending. I think this week is the last episode of the second season, and I cannot recommend it enough. Harrison Ford is so good at it. Not what you expect, and so good. So good. I don't want to spoil anything because it's so good that I would absolutely don't want to spoil any real details of it. But highly recommend it. Shrinking, Apple TV Plus. Go watch it immediately. There's 2 seasons out now.
Yeah, that sounds like something I'd like. I'm certainly a big advocate for therapy, and having been in therapy for years myself. Sounds great. I'll have to check it out. I definitely heard someone mention something about that last week, so glad to hear you bring it up. For my Broom Wagon today, I'm going to keep it pretty simple and spoiler free, because I'm going to talk about a trio of films that I have seen recently that have a very interesting bit of connective tissue between the last scene in each of these 3 different movies. And I don't want to spoil it any further, but the movies are Perfect Days, which is a Japanese film, a simple, beautiful little movie about a guy who works as a cleanup guy for public restrooms in Tokyo. And this story seems very simple, and then it sort of gracefully reveals itself over the runtime. And the final scene of the movie is something that I've never seen done in a film before. The second movie is called Strange Darling. This is like a psycho horror thriller kind of a movie. The sort of a battle between 2 people in a way, and keeps you guessing the entire time. It also does the Tarantino chopped up timeline kind of a thing. It keeps going back and forth in time, and it does so very artfully and very effectively. And something that happens in the very last scene of that movie has this big parallel with Perfect Days that I just stumbled upon because I happened to watch these two movies about 2 weeks apart from each other. And then about 2 weeks after that, I watched the third film, which is A Quiet Place Day One. This is the prequel to the Quiet Place franchise from John Krasinski, Emily Blunt.
Never seen one of those movies. Are they good?
Yeah, they're pretty good. It's very cool. Do you know what the premise of the movie is? Basically, aliens have landed and are attacking us, and they can't see, but they have incredible hearing. And so, literally, if you make a tiny sound, like deadly aliens come racing towards you, essentially. And so, the Quiet Place Day One, this recent movie starring Lupita Nyong'o, sort of chronicles when
She's
the
awesome.
aliens. Yeah, she's great. And it's like chronicles when the aliens first arrive on Earth and what that's like. And the very final scene in that movie somehow is tied to one of the other films in this very specific way. And it was one of those moments for me that my therapist always describes as like the universe talking to you, because they're the tie between the three endings of these movies just kind of all coincided for me and just was like, wow. So that's all I'm going to say. The first two of the movies I think are both fantastic. Quiet Place Day One, pretty damn good as well. So check them out.
So now let me ask you for mine, because I literally haven't watched any of these movies. Should I watch them, A Quiet Place 1, Quiet Place 2, and then go back to Day 1? Or should I go ahead and start it with Day 1 so that, or would that be, would I be, ruining it for myself later on?
I don't think that it matters what order you watch them in as far as the Quiet Place franchise goes.
All right. That works. Awesome.
So I know it's a big ask for people to watch all three of those movies just to see this strange little parallel, but hey, it was interesting to me, and I've been talking about it all week. So
hey,
that's what I got.
Plenty of people that watch, that'll go watch 3 movies. So on that note, we'll be right back. That's all for this week. Join us next week as we run through our cycling resolutions for 2025. We'll also complete our look at Lance Armstrong with part 2 of our conversation, focusing specifically on his post-racing life and career. And finally, season 4 of HBO's The Wire, where we'll dig into the show's look at the education system in Baltimore and its interplay with cops and crime. Until then, for my brother Matt, I'm Justin Harper. Thanks for joining us on another ride beyond the slipstream. Allez!
Beyond the Slipstream is a production of Harperama. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please like and subscribe, smash that button, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, tell all your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Ale!